Want to move?
Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Thank you for being here. I know that there is a huge interest for everything that has to do with COP28, and at this exact time, there is a briefing. Should I say this? Because maybe some people leave the room. Please stay with us. We are going to start in a couple of minutes. So if some of you who are at the back would like to please join us a little bit closer, because we're gonna hold an interactive sessions towards the end. I will be handing out the mic, and if I need to run all the way to the back, that will be a bit complicated also for my colleague Lucas. So if we could maybe all be a bit closer together, that would be super kind of you. Thank you. We'll start in 2 minutes. Thanks a lot. Hello again, and welcome everybody to this event, this side event organized by the UN Climate Change Secretariat, the Transparency Division. It is my pleasure to be your moderator today. My name is Mariana Castaño Cano. I am a climate communication expert, founder of 10 Billion Solutions, and I used to work with this incredible crew of people in the Secretariat. And we are here to dive into understanding what is it, the Enhanced Transparency Framework. So this event, it's titled, as you can see, Transparency Training, Building Capacities of Non-Party Stakeholders in Preparation for the Enhanced Transparency Framework. Why to open up the process and the awareness, increase awareness among non-party stakeholders? Because in the end, it's everybody and not just government representatives with that will have to implement the emission reductions at the adaptation efforts and support also for climate action. So out of the events that were held last year in regional climate weeks and especially the Together for Transparency series of events at the COP in Sharm el-Sheikh, the colleagues at the Secretariat thought that much more had to be done in terms of awareness raising, understanding how the ETF will work, how the ETF will serve everybody, not just the parties, in their climate action and transparency efforts. And for this, we have prepared today a 1 hour and 15 minutes session that will start with a few presentations, and then we'll go into a question and answer session. We'll have quite of an open flow, so we expect from you participation live. You can ask us for the mic, and then of course we have, a meeting without a Mentimeter. No meeting. So we have a Mentimeter, of course, so we'll ask for your participation through the Mentimeter that we will present in a second. But also I want to say hello to the people watching online and to invite them as well to participate, because the Mentimeter will be open for everybody. And now, without further delay, I would like now to give time for participation, because we are going to open exactly. So the time for votes, well, it's not a voting, but the time for participation online is open, and we decided we need to understand who do we have in the room. So we would like to understand where do you come from and what do you do? Who are you closer to, in which field of work you are. If you don't get to flash the QR code, please go to menti.com and type the code, which is, also you get it on the columns, and my colleague Lucas has a copy of the QR code, so just please ask him for help. So it is very easy. You just open your camera, you just flash that, or go to menti.com and find out the survey and answer those two questions. Where do you come from and which group do you identify with? So, and my colleague Federico has the slide with the results. We have 16, 17, we're getting there, but I see many more people here in the room. So yeah, it's growing. I mean, we have quite a lot of people from one set of countries. Okay, so if I may ask, so we need the colleagues to please show what we have here on the laptop on the table, to bring this up into the screen. Yeah, it will come up in a sec, so you will be able to see the results of the Menti. If it doesn't work and can't read that out loud, that's not a problem. It gives more time for people to fill in the survey. Okay, here we are. So which region do you come from? We have 10 people from Western Europe and others, 9 people from Latin America and the Caribbean, 9 people from Asia Pacific, 1 person from Eastern Europe, and 1 person from Africa. And well, I don't know exactly if this is the set of people we have in the room, because it's a mix of people online and people from the room, but we get the idea, right? We need more people from the South in every room. So I hope that we can increase presence of non-party stakeholder representatives from everywhere. And now we move on, Federico, please, to the next slide. The next slide. Which group do you identify with? And, well, everybody from the parties is at the COP28. Oh, now it's changing. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Because we have IGOs, we have parties, so this is interesting. Non-governmental NGOs, parties, so 45% are party representatives, Cool. We also have NGOs, 30%, 13% international IGOs. Also, journalists in the room. Thank you for being here. I know how precious your time is. Youth, fantastic. Super, great. So we have half of the room, more or less, of party representatives. That's good, because what we want to achieve is this kind of exchange and mutual learning between parties and non-party stakeholders, because for the implementation they will have, and they have already, they have to work together. And now, after this opening and getting to know each other a little bit better, we are going to hear in detail what is it, the ETF. And I would like to give the floor to Veronica Colerio. Veronica is the team lead at the ETF coordination unit here in the Secretariat. Veronica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mariana, and thank everybody for joining us. I think in order to make my life easy, my first slide will be a video that will explain what is transparency. And then I will want to go a little bit in detail. So I think, yeah, I hope you enjoy the video, and I'll see you soon.
Well-functioning, cooperative international climate change system. In the context What is transparency? Transparency is at the heart of a well-functioning, cooperative international climate change system. In the context of climate change, transparency refers to the reporting and review of relevant climate information. The Paris Agreement empowers countries to limit the global average temperature increase to as close to 1.5 degrees Celsius as possible, to strengthen climate resilience and ensure financial flows are consistent with these goals. The Enhanced Transparency Framework, known as the ETF, will demonstrate how countries are progressing towards these objectives to reduce emissions and increase removals, build resilience and mobilize financial, technical, and capacity-building support, and highlight where they need further support to achieve their goals. The transparent reporting and review of information builds trust and accountability into the system. It provides a better understanding of climate actions, and it empowers countries to make their own, more informed decisions, to set their own meaningful targets, to inform domestic policies, and to attract needed financial, technological, and capacity-building support. Through the transparent reporting process under the ETF, countries learn from shared achievements on climate action and support, and build on the lessons learned by others. Regular reporting and review provides a better understanding of our collective progress on climate action and support needed and provided during the global stocktake. In addition, it encourages the global community to strengthen climate action and increase investment to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. Participation in the ETF is essential for parties to reach the objectives of the Paris Agreement while also meeting their own sustainable development goals. For more information, visit unfccc.int/transparency.
Oh, so in a nutshell, that is what the ETF is about. Veronica, now we're going to dive into that more in detail.
Thank you, Mariana. Yes, we heard a little bit the basis, and it's good so that I don't have to start from zero. But basically, I think the message that I want to bring to you is that transparency is much more than reporting and review. Transparency is building confidence, not only the confidence for the party to know what is the climate action, what's happening, what's the support. So when we talk about transparency, transparency has many building blocks. And the fact that you measured and that you need to report and make this public, that also builds on the credibility, and not only on the credibility of what parties are doing, but also as jointly where we are today, and so that it's easier to try to set the path of where we want to be. It's important, and when we talk about transparency, and I think Mariana was saying it's about community, and I think Federico will go a little bit in depth to that, but it's not only parties, but also we need to take into account that in this transparency we are talking about experts, we are talking about the community, we are talking about other non-party stakeholders, we are talking about the media. It's good that you are here, and also transparency is accountability. And my colleague here, Karin, will also go a little bit into that, but I know during this session we are talking about the global stocktake, and the global stocktake needs to see what I was saying, like where we are and where we want to be. And in that sense, the only way to know where we are is actually knowing what parties' actions are taking, what are the support they are providing, what are the support that is needed for this climate action that it's needed. So I think this was the first message that I wanted to give it to you. Of course, and I think it was there in the video as well, so to be on the practical side, parties need to report. They need to report on what they are doing related to climate action, but also they need to report what the support they are providing if they are developed countries, and if they are developing countries, they need to report on what are their needs, if capacity building needs and financial needs. And I'm here talking about transparency, but of course we have the transparency framework until Paris came, and I think Karin will go in depth on what is coming. There is, after this reporting by parties, there's a review process in which international experts are involved, people representing all parts of the world, in which there's a very nice very nice discussions with the party. So it's a very enriching process in which experts learn from the country experts, but the country experts also learn from the international experts. So this part is also very nice. And this consideration that is basically, I don't know if you've seen when you are at the main lobby, when you enter the venue, there's nice posters about the facilitative sharing of views. So that's part of the consideration. At this point is there's this process for developing countries and a process for multilateral assessment for developed countries, but in the future, and Karin will go through that, it will be a joint process. So this is where countries come and they can ask questions to each other. Countries are able to actually present more updated information, and it's also a very nice process that it's open to everybody to be there and learn more about countries' actions. So a little bit about what are the benefits for transparency. So we try to put it a little bit on the national level. If I'm a country, or if I'm an NGO in a country, or if I'm a business in a country, this information, the whole process of actually getting the information really builds the capacity of the country, and really builds on if the experts from the country are also participating in the review process. This is really a very nice exercise to learn about what also it makes the country have the information to make better informed decisions, to if they are planning for policies, if they need to grab all this information, and this will make countries be able to really use all this information. Of course, by making these reports and getting all this information, awareness is raised, awareness about what the country is doing, what are the plans, what are the projections for the future, how well they are doing regarding their goals. And of course, internationally, this is also important because it builds trust. We know what others are doing. We can see whether we are going as a group into the right direction. Of course, when we prepare these documents, parties can identify what are the needs, and then when other parties need to support these countries, they have the information available to understand what is the support that they need to prioritize. This slide, although quite populated, it's to say that transparency didn't start at Paris, or it started 20 years ago, and it has been evolving until Paris. So there is a transparency framework right now that we are working on that actually started with, in long time ago, with the reviews of GHG inventories of developed countries and the reviews of developed countries' national communications. And in 2014 and 2015, the process that we have right now started. And we have like 2 avenues, one for developed countries, one for developing countries. And then in Paris, this is where the decision about the enhanced transparency framework, and that Karin will further discuss, was made. And now we have a full avenue for all parties under the enhanced transparency framework. And in Katowice and in Glasgow, all the transparency negotiations kind of ended in all the rules that we have now, and that I think Karin will better explain when she has her presentation. So all these years, and I'm talking about 20 years, although for developing countries it's less, and this is important to understand that when we start the enhanced transparency framework, countries come with different experiences. Some countries have been 20 years of experiences, but others have some experiences presenting their BURs and presenting their reports. So they all come together into this new process with different starting points, but whatever has happened until now really is serving as a foundation, and parties have started, and some countries have like really strong institutional arrangements, others are really working hard to get there. The other thing that we noted that it was quite good is that when countries have to monitor periodically and actually submit their reports periodically, they are more willing, when you need to show what you're doing, they are more willing to do more, to actually get to their goals and exceed their goals. So this is something that we noted about this process. And also there was active participation, and all these experts that had to go through, not only as national experts, but also the international experts to prepare for these reports and to prepare to be part of the transparency process. There was a lot of experience and knowledge gain, and this we thought it was really one of the key achievements. But as Karin will present, there's a lot more to do in the future. So, and with that, I think I will give the floor to Mariana, and I hope, again, my message is to try to open the knowledge that transparency, it's a lot of things, and I think Federico will also try to go into each of the different organizations that you can represent and what transparency could mean to everyone. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronica. And for the people who were taking pictures of the presentation, please know that this presentation is already online. It's on the unfccc.int/together4transparency webpage. So this presentation will be there. Of course, the recording of the event will be in the system, so don't worry about that. And please keep your telephones up because we still need some more interaction before we open for the question and answers after. We would like to know in one word, so you can use the same Menti code or you can scan this QR, the same one. What does climate transparency mean to you in one word? Because we would like to build a word map. And the second question is more for you to explain what are the top co-benefits that climate transparency is bringing or can bring in your country or in your area of work. And the third question is, what are the two top challenges for implementing strong climate transparency in your area or in your work? We have 5 minutes for that. So yes, the time is up now for participation. So I want to ask people to raise their hands. So those of you who feel have something to say and want to say it out loud, of course you can do it on written format. But yeah, we have that already word map building up, accountability. Yeah, what is it, transparency for you? Absolutely, accountability, honesty, I love that, honesty, because there is value in it, personal values, beliefs, that is a key in this process. Trust, exactly. Honesty, trust, accountability, absolutely. Reliability, definitely. We absolutely need to speak all of us the same language, a common framework, so that we work on a plain level field. That is very important. Learning, absolutely, that is why we are here today, and that is why the ETF division is organizing so many more opportunities to engage and to learn. Collaboration, absolutely, yes. How could we bring this huge endeavor ahead without collaboration? Impossible. Local, I lost it somewhere. I saw local something, local cooperation. Local conditions, definitely. This is not a top-down exercise. Local conditions. We need, I heard last year at the African ETF dialogue, I mean that very often all these frameworks come as a one-size-fits-all thing, and of course we know, those of you who've worked on the ground, that it doesn't work like that, right? So you need a bottom-up approach, so that's why this process should be open for everybody to build it. Okay, great, and maybe we can go on into the next question. So in your country or area of work, what are the co-benefits that climate transparency can bring? And I see everybody is busy typing, and maybe somebody who has typed already, maybe somebody wants to participate and give me one co-benefit that in your country, in your area, transparency is bringing. So any hands? So I don't see hands now here in the room. Yes, please, sir.
Well, the one-word answer is inclusion.
Yeah, absolutely, inclusion. And in your, are you a country representative or a delegate from
an NGO, yeah.
Excellent. And in your work, transparency can help you work better, deliver better. How can transparency help you?
Well, transparency opens up the process, so everybody can participate. Without transparency, participation is limited to a few people who are aware of, and a few people who have access. And people who've been traditionally left out, they will remain left out without transparency.
So climate action cannot be a black box, right? It needs to have glass windows like these ones. So any more hands for this question? Maybe we can bring up some of the answers. Federico, do we have them? For the first question on the co-benefits? Okay, so these are the co-benefits, sorry. The co-benefit, again, yeah, absolutely. Stronger relationships. Yes, we create bonds and we reinforce bonds when we trust each other, definitely. Reputation. Oh, yes, this is a big thing. Reputation. And I think that Veronica touched upon that when she said that when there is a framework where one can show how good we are doing or how, let's say good we are doing, we hope that they do good, there is a peer pressure and a peer recognition. So this is very important. Action, public awareness, a stronger relationship, understanding, government trust, absolutely. Parties know that this is important, that black boxes don't work anymore. Evidence-based actions, definitely. This is huge because we need to know, I had a conversation this morning. Having a nice NDC is good, right? But it is like having a degree and not using it. So what for? So we need to show progress. We need to have evidence to show that this progress is real and is happening. So maybe, Federico, we can go to the next question. Yeah, I mean, this sounds all great, right? I mean, it's written in the Paris Agreement. There is a manual. We'll give you the link to that manual on how the ETF works. But then, yeah, I mean, beyond the paper, how do we implement it? And why aren't we implementing it faster? And well, there is a whole process that it's now starting. But again, we have 30 years behind us of transparency framework. So things that are obstacle, institutional arrangement is number one, definitely. Because as Veronica said, we have the examples in some countries, Veronica, that demonstrate countries are very well equipped, right, with institutional arrangements for transparency, but there are all other countries that need help, they need support, they need also to learn from each other, and financial resources, definitely. Capacity building and human resources. So I think they're interlinked, right? They are all interlinked. You need institutional arrangements so that the right people are given the right resources to do the job. So this is all great. I think this is a clear message to delegates from countries in the room who are very much responsible of putting in place those institutional arrangements. Maybe we can go on to the next one. Yes, the next one. Okay, so the questions are done. The questions on the Menti are done. Before we move on to Karin Simonson for the next presentation, are there any burning comments that we'll have a question and answer time after? But we don't have now any burning comments, so I think, Karin, we can go on with the next. And now it is when we are going to get into the nitty-gritty. All the details. And Karin Simonson is the UNFCCC Secretariat Program Officer at the ETF Coordination Unit. And your go-to person to know everything about the nitty-gritty of the ETF. Please, Karin.
Thanks, Mariana, and good afternoon, everyone. Really nice to see lots of people here, lots of interest. I think what Veronica and Mariana and the survey have gone through already is why? Why do we do transparency? Why is it important? What does it bring? Why should we invest the effort? What I'm going to try to walk through is a little bit the how now. So looking at the how and a bit of the architecture within the Paris Agreement, we see that the Paris Agreement establishes three main objectives. Those are the temperature goals, so holding warming below 2 degrees, striving towards efforts for 1.5, building a climate resilient and low emissions development pathway for all parties, all individuals to follow, and then aligning the financial flows with the goals of the Paris Agreement. But how do we achieve that? And that's where we move into the second level, which is through action. And on action, we're talking about action both on adaptation front and on mitigation. So a balance between both is really needed. And then the second complementary area is support. And support, of course, is very important to incentivize action, to support action, to make action possible. And there we have finance, technology development and transfer, and capacity building. So all of that is happening, But how do we know where we're making progress? How do we know that this is happening? How do we hold countries accountable to what they've pledged? And this is really where the third level comes in, and that's accountability. There are essentially 3 different ways of increasing the accountability of the actions under the Paris Agreement. The first is the transparency of action and support. That's the ETF that we've talked about a little bit already. That's primarily aimed at the national level. And then we have 2 additional functions that work a bit at the international level. So the global stocktake, which is an assessment at the global level of how everyone altogether is doing. You could think of the ETF as your report card. If you're a student, you get a report card. The global stocktake is how you're doing as a class, how everyone in your same grade is progressing altogether to meet the objectives. And then, of course, there's compliance, and that means facilitative, furthering implementation, and talking about how do we make things better? How do we ensure that parties are doing what they're supposed to do? We'll talk a little bit more about each of these as we go through. So how does transparency fit in? We've talked about this concept, but how does it really fit in? The Paris Agreement, as some of you know in the room, some of you were there, some of you negotiated this. The Paris Agreement established this enhanced transparency framework, or the ETF. And what was remarkable about this progression was that for the first time, parties, all different parties, developed countries, developing countries, all agreed to follow more or less the same fundamental basics when it comes to reporting and review. Of course, it's not only reporting and review, it's bigger than that. But for the first time, parties agreed on a universal set of guidelines on how to implement transparency. In order to do that, because we understand that parties are coming from all different perspectives, different levels of institutional arrangement, different experience, different background, the ETF builds in a couple of facilitating principles. That is essentially it builds on and enhances the 30 years of experience that we have, starting with greenhouse gas inventories and building towards 2 separate systems running in parallel and now converging into one universal system. It represents the idea of continuous improvement. So if you're a developed country and you have 30 years of experience, does that mean that you stay where you are? No, it means that you can still continue to do better, you can work deeper, you can go into further details, you can aim for more transparency. Transparency isn't a final destination, it's really about a journey, and everyone can continue on that same path. It reflects that there are different starting points, and it also reflects this idea that some parties may need a helping hand, some additional support to help them get onto the pathway of full implementation. One very important aspect, and one which is perhaps unique, didn't exist before, is the idea of flexibility. So everyone's on the same path, we're coming from different starting points, and as a result, some of the parties that need it, developing countries, may need some flexibility. That may sound like it's an open-ended, you can do whatever you want, but there are very specific conditions, some bounds around how we provide that flexibility within the ETF to the countries that need it. And so that is detailed here in terms of the scope of the reporting requirements, the frequency of the reporting, the level of detail, and the scope of the review. So this really talks about the journey. If we're all starting in the pale green dots on the one side, starting from different places, some with experience, some with less experience, some with stronger institutional arrangements, some countries with a lot more resources, some with very small teams or very small resources. The idea is that starting in 2024, with the first biennial transparency report, we all embark on a journey along the same path with the idea of getting to this end point, where we're at one point where essentially all parties are capable of meeting the same reporting requirements, and we're all sharing the same level of information. So that's really the idea, that we're converging on this pathway towards the same shared goal. And I think one important thing that I'd like to emphasize here is that reporting isn't just reporting for reporting's sake. We don't do a report and just have it sit there. That report, the information that it contains, feeds into a number of different processes, and I'd like to show you how those processes interlink. Before we move to that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the timeline. So where are we at now? We've talked about 30 years of experience. We're talking about those two parallel tracks, developed and developing, and where we're going. Where we are right now is in 2023, obviously. We're at the end. We're starting to wrap up those two parallel processes. So that's the biennial reports for developed countries and the biennial update reports for developing countries. And those two processes will end at the end of 2024. What will continue, however, are some of the important foundations that we've built over the years, and that includes the greenhouse gas inventories, the national communications, and some of the specific reporting that happens in different sectors, like, for example, REDD+. In 2024, as I mentioned, the new biennial transparency report is launched, and this, as you'll see, is followed, and I can't point to it, I don't have a laser, but you see BTR 1 starting. It's due the end of 2024. Then the next process in 2025 and over 2026 is the technical expert review. So we'll talk a little bit about what this review means and why it's helpful. And then we have overlapping preparation for the second biennial transparency report, of course, every 2 years, followed by the facilitative multilateral consideration of progress. And I'll talk a little bit about this as well. So as you can see, some of the things we've established continue throughout the future, some of them end, and then we move into the biennial transparency reporting cycle. And the cycle will continue again and again on a biennial basis. This is a bit busy, and I apologize if some of you in the back are going to have a bit of a hard time understanding or seeing the detail here. But what this represents is that on one side, we have the greenhouse gas inventories, the national communication, the biennial reports. Those are the existing reporting processes for developed countries. On the other side, we have the BURs, biennial update reports, and the national communications. Those are for developing countries. As I've talked about, those processes start to converge, and what we see in each one of these little boxes is the kind of information that is reported under each one of those types of reports. And as you can see, there are some gaps in each one of those columns, but as we move towards the orange column in the middle, we see that all of those different elements are brought together in the biennial transparency report, and this is why we're referring to this as an enhanced transparency framework. It enhances what we have already and brings all parties together towards something that's a little bit more common. So I talked about reporting isn't just for reporting's sake. Reporting is also done, and as I mentioned, if you did homework and nobody ever checked your homework, what kind of a job would you do, right? So this idea of review is the idea that somebody comes, a team of international experts who have qualified to be review experts under the new process. They will come and they will look at what a party has reported. And this is important because it ensures that the kind of information, the detail, the transparency of that information, the clarity, the completeness, that it's reported in line with the reporting guidelines. And so that's very important. It makes sure that all of this information, GHG inventory, information on tracking progress, so knowing, are we actually making progress? Are parties reporting what they should be reporting? Climate change impacts and adaptation, you'll see that that box is a slightly different color. That's because that's a voluntary, and for those of you who follow this issue quite closely, you'll know that we just agreed on a process for a voluntary review of this particular type of information. And then the support provided to developing countries, that's a well-established. What is not reviewed, and here one thing to keep in mind is that the review process is not intended to be discouraging. It's not intended to be a punishment of sorts. You're not expected to fail a review. It's intended to be facilitative, and that means to help every party improve over time, again, to get towards that journey. to develop more complete and more transparent reporting. And so what is not reviewed is, are you doing enough? Is the adequacy of your domestic actions. The expert review team will not make any political judgments on what you're doing, but they will review the information to see that it's clear so that we can understand what you're doing without judging it necessarily. And so that's a very important aspect, because some parties are less comfortable, and we have to understand that they're coming from different points along this trajectory. We'd like everyone to get to the point where they're comfortable with having this information reviewed, they see that this review process brings benefits, and that it continues along this pathway to improvement. A second step is in the review process, is the idea of this facilitative multilateral consideration. And for those of you who have followed biennial reports or biennial update reports, we have these processes already established. And this is really involving two phases, where the party presents, this follows the review, the party presents and talks about what they've learned from the reporting, answers some questions from others in the room who might want to understand a bit better. And there is a summary report that basically captures all of the interactions from the technical expert review phase to the interactions and the presentation and the answers that are provided by the party in this live interaction. So why is this important? Well, again, it's not done just for the sake of doing a presentation. It's really aimed at the idea of sharing information on successes and failures so that we can start to learn from each other. It shows, in the interest of building trust and confidence in the system, it shows that parties are pulling their weight. They're doing their bit. They're doing what they said they would do. It also helps to identify where support may be needed. And that's a very important part to helping all the parties move towards that end point. And it prepares for the next cycle of reporting. So it gains experience and knowledge from the review process and from this FMCP. I'd like to talk a little bit about shifting from the national into more of the international aspect. So how does the information that every individual party report, how does that fit into the global stocktake? Here we see that the Paris Agreement established this idea of collective progress. How do we assess collective progress over time? And the GST will cover information from mitigation, adaptation, means of implementation, and support. And again, it's in this comprehensive type facilitative interaction. So every 5 years, party reports the inventory information, the BTRs, the compilation of all of those reports, so the report card from the class, if you will, all of that information feeds in with other information sources, and the global stocktake process looks at that and says, where are we at? Are we meeting what we need to, are we on the path we need to be on in order to keep to that temperature goal? Are we meeting the finance goals, et cetera? So this is really the part at which we shine a light on our progress and see if we're doing enough. And of course, the output of the global stocktake is intended to inform parties where they may be doing well and where they may need to take further action. This just represents, again, this idea that everything within the Paris Agreement is designed to reinforce and build a sense of a cycle. So the NDCs establish what a party wants to do in order to address the three objectives under the Paris Agreement. The ETF is then the transparency. How are we doing? What are we doing to address those objectives? And then also that additional part of reporting and facilitative multilateral consideration of progress, and then feeding into the GST, which then looks at global or aggregate assessment. So what happens then if what we're doing is not enough, or if a country isn't doing what it's supposed to do? Again, in the same vein of this idea of being facilitative and encouraging all parties to take on highest ambition that they can take. The committee to facilitate implementation and promote compliance, which is a group of experts. It isn't there to punish. It isn't there to say you failed. What the committee does, if a party doesn't report or if it doesn't participate in the processes that I've described so far, or they miss a mandatory commitment, what the committee does is it looks and says, how can we assist? What areas do you need to discuss further? What recommendations would help that party progress further along the pathway? And what findings might be useful in order to create that learning environment where parties, again, are encouraged to do more. So again, instead of it being a stick, this process is intended to be facilitative and encouraging and more of a carrot. I'd like to look a little bit forward now, and this starts to open some opportunities for involvement, and Federico will continue from that and share a little bit more where all of you can be involved. Over the next couple of years, I've mentioned that there is a training program. The training program is available online. It's accessible. The first course, the overview course, is available now. The additional modules in each of the thematic areas will be available over the course of the rest of this year. And it's a chance to train yourself, to familiarize yourself with all of the aspects and how these pieces fit together. It's intended to then produce a pool of expert reviewers who then can participate in the technical expert review of parties' BTRs. And we would like to really encourage any of you who are interested to take the training, and then if you become an eligible reviewer, to register with a national focal point and join the roster of experts. And the third key deliverable that we're working on this year as the Secretariat is the development of the reporting tools. So this is really IT infrastructure that helps parties submit all of this information into a common platform so that we have all of that information that constitutes transparency. And so that's been a lot of information. Before I turn to my colleague who will talk a little bit more about some of the engagement and outreach initiatives, I just want to pause and see if there are any questions. Mariana, if you want to see if...
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Do we have questions in the room? Yeah. Thank you, Lucas. Thanks. If you don't mind, please say your name.
Yes, my name is
Thank you.
Khaled. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I had a question to you, Karin. I'm not sure if I understood you right or not, but could you take the courses without being registered with the focal points, or do you have to register first with the focal point, then you can take the courses? Can you clarify that, please?
Thanks. Yes. The way it's set up now is that the courses are publicly available. So anyone who has an interest can take the course, can walk through. It's only people who are registered with a national focal point who have passed those courses successfully and the exams that can then proceed to be eligible reviewers. But the training itself, that information is publicly available, yes.
And is there additional training for people who are registered with the national focal point, or is it?
It's the same training. I would say that this is foundational training, and then there is additional experience, of course, that you gain from being part of an expert review team. So part of that next level of learning is really the on-the-job practical training that you get once you are involved in a review team.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that very good questions. And I would like now to invite other colleagues here. We have Lucas, please. We have a person at the back.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My name is Alioune Fall. I'm from Mauritania in West Africa. I have a couple of questions about the BTR. As you know, some of the countries have a standalone BTR, while others have a combined BTR and national communication. And we are in the process now of developing our PIP, which is a project implementation plan. So I wanted, yes. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So I want to know one thing. One question is, what have to be reported in December 2024? Is it because, bear in mind the flexibility for LDC countries. So I wanted to know, is it because if you have the BTR, the National Communication, National Inventory Report done, and then subsequently you will have your BTR done for next year, so which will be kind of like an update of your National Communication Inventory. So, and we don't have time because I understand that we have other elements that have to be present with the BTR, so I'm just throwing things there. So what is exactly important to be present in December 2024? Is it just the NIR or everything else? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I think the question is a very good one. It's a very technical question, and it depends a bit on the country. As I mentioned, there is a flexibility provision. So while we have an intended timeline of December 31st, 2024 for the submission of the BTRs, and in that case, the BTR includes a national inventory report. So that includes all of the data on the greenhouse gas inventories. There is some flexibility for developing countries. And so I think, I don't know the specific of any individual party or how the flexibility provision may be applied in specific cases. But the intention is that the greenhouse gas inventory part of the BTR is submitted at the same time as it's actually part of the BTR itself, and so that should be submitted together. If you would like to discuss perhaps a little bit further the specifics of the case in Mauritania, I think we can perhaps have a conversation after, if that's helpful. Thanks.
Thank you for your presentation. Cynthia from Institute for Climate and Society, Brazil. I have never heard about the role of reviewers, so I'm really curious to know more about this. And also if it will be on personal capacity or if the parties will accredit some organizations to do that, and how we could have more people engaging in this process. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, and I think it's great that we're getting the message out about the importance of review experts. We are trying to, as we scale up and as the frequency of reporting increases, we are looking for more review experts. So this is why the training is a very important part of that. But then also, as you mentioned, becoming part of the roster of experts through the national focal point. My colleague, Federico, is actually working on the initiative to bring in additional review experts. So I'm going to turn to him to answer a little bit in greater detail to your question. Thanks.
Thanks, Karin, and thank you very much for the question. Let's make a bit of a distinction. To be, according to the mandates and the current decisions, to be nominated in the roster of experts, you must be nominated either by a party or by an intergovernmental organization. This is about being in the roster of experts. Then the UNFCCC Secretariat draws from the pool of available experts who are nominated in the roster to compose expert review teams who conduct technical expert reviews of parties' BTR, starting from, of course, after the first submission of BTR 1. In that case, the effort is conducted by the expert on its expert capacity, but of course, they do serve in that role nominated by their respective party or intergovernmental organization. So this is, I hope this addresses your question. Thanks.
Thanks, Federico. And perhaps just to add to that, when the composition of the expert review team is considered, there needs to be a balance of thematic expertise. For example, you'd need a mitigation expert and an adaptation expert and a support expert, but then also regional balance, so representatives from developed and developing countries from the different regions, gender and language. So there's a number of considerations that goes into the composition of the expert review teams. But all of those who serve on the expert review team have to be eligible on their roster of experts and nominated, as Federico mentioned. And then the Secretariat takes that pool and composes the teams for each country.
Take the exams.
Yes, and to be eligible, of course, it means not just taking the training, but also successfully passing the exams. Yes, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And we still have time for one more question before we move on to the next section. Yes, the lady. Okay, we'll go to you later, sir. Please. Thank you.
Thank you. Roxanne Lake. I'm from Brussels. It's a question for Karin. You replied to the gentleman concerning the sequencing of the reporting, that the national inventory report and the BTR should be submitted in one report. Did I understand you well? Because I thought that it could be in conjunction, but not an obligation.
Yes, thank you. There are, because we're moving from annual greenhouse gas inventories for developed countries and then moving towards biennial inventories for developing countries, there are some circumstances where the timing is a little bit different. Yes. But if we consider what is contained in the guidance for the BTR, that includes the inventory information. And so ideally, in your BTR, it would include that information as well. There are, as you mentioned, there are some details, and what I think we will refer you to is our ETF reference manual, which kind of walks through in greater detail the different circumstances and the timing, et cetera. So yes, I didn't want to get too technical, but you're absolutely right. There are some circumstances where there's different considerations.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. And unfortunately, we must finish with your questions, sir. Thanks a lot to everybody for the questions. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I am Sharad Kumar. I am from India. So I would like to ask you, so since the BUR is a subset of BTR, so can we combine both BUR and BTR? So it has to be last BUR has to be submitted, and at the same time the first BTR has to be submitted by the end of the next year.
Thanks for the question, and you're right that as we're wrapping up these two systems, there's a short period of overlap. The BURs, what we're hearing is that the BURs are a great testing ground and a preparatory exercise for countries to get ready for the BTR. And so the idea is that if a country can submit a BUR and undergo the technical analysis before they start a BTR, that's recommended. But of course, there's limited funding available in some situations. And so there's a bit of, I guess, it depends on the timing and the state of readiness. If a party has not submitted a BUR at any point in time, I think the encouragement is generally to go through that process as a bit of a experience and learning to prepare a party for the BTR. Does that answer your question in terms of what's required? I think the idea for the review of a BTR is that there would not necessarily be capacity to review both at the same time. So given that we've looked at that slide that shows the different areas, a lot of the areas of reporting that would be contained in a BUR are also covered in a BTR. So it wouldn't necessarily make sense, and I don't know individual country circumstances, but it might not necessarily make sense to submit both at the same time. Generally, what's recommended is to do the BUR and use that for learning for the BTR. But again, we can also follow up offline in individual cases to see what works best in terms of timing and capacity.
So excellent. Thank you, Karin, and thank you everybody for the questions. Thank you, Lucas. And now we are going to move to the last part of today's event. So we learned about the background, where do all this come from. We understood why. We understood how. I mean, there is a lot underneath the presentation, but there are many resources, and of course our experts are here. And now the who, right? There are not just parties. For this entire process to be comprehensive, effective, and inclusive, we need everybody, the non-party stakeholders. And Federico Brocchieri is going to explain to us how this participation, engagement, and from non-party stakeholders is going to be articulated.
Thank you very much, Mariana, and good afternoon again, everyone. So in my presentation, I will just try to walk you through in very few slides, I promise, some of the basics of why we are doing this. Why are we organizing this event under the banner of Together for Transparency? Following up to the presentations from my colleagues Veronica and Karin, you've seen how crucial the role of parties is in this process. Reporting and review of climate information will be the foundation for the global community to have robust, reliable, regular data and information about climate action and support. But there is more than that. Transparency is more than just reporting and review. As Veronica mentioned at the beginning, transparency is about building trust, transparency is about accountability, and transparency is about community. And this is where Together for Transparency comes in. It's an initiative that the UNFCCC Secretariat launched last year, COP27, with a view of bringing together parties and non-party stakeholders. Because this is not just about parties. We must count on the engagement and cooperation from all different groups of stakeholders. In a slide, in a minute, I will come to say a few more words about how different groups of stakeholders link to transparency. But this is very important to understand. So this platform, these initiatives, has multiple purposes. One is definitely showcasing success stories, sharing experiences and lessons learned over the course of the last 30 years. Then there is a component about engagement. And engagement is about bringing together leaders, experts, representatives of different groups from different countries, different regions, with different experiences and backgrounds to ensure that the discussions on transparency get to another level, where we focus not only on the technicalities. I remember I have the opportunity of attending this process over the years, initially as observer, as an NGO, then as a party delegate, and now with the UNFCCC Secretariat. And I know how transparency arrangements sometimes can be perceived as something just for the technical experts, something that doesn't really bother or concern all other actors that are attending this process. But this is not the case. So it is about engaging in a dialogue to try to enhance political buy-in about the role and key importance of transparency. Then, of course, as we've just discussed, another objective of this initiative is to sustain momentum for ETF implementation. Getting there, ensure that all countries are ready to submit their first BTR is going to be very important in the next couple of years. And as it was said earlier, transparency and the ETF is not a journey, it's not a destination, it's a journey. It's about what is in between. We need to make sure that BTRs are submitted, and it's not that important that they are the perfect reports. What is important is to get started, to have the information being submitted and then undergoing reviews, which will help countries to improve, and then to share through the FMCP, the Facilitative Multilateral Consideration of Progress, to showcase their experience and engage in a dialogue with parties and non-party stakeholders about what went well, what could be improved. Then, of course, this initiative is also aiming to contributing towards the testing of the reporting tools and offering in-person training opportunities. As Karin mentioned earlier, the training program for technical experts is publicly available. You are all encouraged to take the training, and we really count on having as many of you then possibly being nominated in the roster of experts, and then undertaking examination, and then becoming an eligible expert to take part in the reviews under the ETF. Just to provide a bit of a snapshot from what the initiative did at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, we hosted a 2-week series of events dedicated to climate transparency. events were organized under 3 different tracks. The first track was about an evolving transparency landscape, so sharing experiences, lessons learned in preparation for the ETF. The second track was actually about gathering transparency perspectives. Perspectives not only from parties, but also from non-party stakeholders. So we organized a number of events with all different NGO constituencies attending the process, and also with experts, intergovernmental organizations, and so forth. We even hosted an event with media, which was very important, and I will get to that in a minute. And the third track was about bringing support to the ground. I think we emphasized clearly how important it will be, of course, to provide support to especially developing countries, which definitely have different starting points in aligning to the new requirements under the ETF. There were a high number of events organized, as you can see, with a total of almost 185 speakers attending from different realities. So the initiative really kicked off at COP27, and it's going forward. As you may have seen, we also have a small transparency corner just outside this room, where we're also very keen on providing information to any interested participants. And I can also anticipate there will be plans for additional events throughout the year in the lead up to and during COP28. This is just to provide some of the snapshots in COP27. We also had attendance by Al Gore, showcasing the importance of climate data and transparency within this process and beyond, and a number of other events involving high-level champions, youth, and different groups of stakeholders. So getting to the conclusion, this is my not the very last, but the last substantial slide that I will be presenting. And this is just really to provide some more details about how transparency is relevant to different groups of stakeholders. I think we spoke about parties. We emphasized how transparency is important for parties. Experts, we also touched upon this. The role of expert is essential for transparency in reporting and review. The reporting side is because the role of expert is key to producing reports which include robust, reliable data that make reports of a good quality. And then the role of experts in the review process is actually key to ensuring that the reports that are submitted are transparent, are complete, are accurate, are comparable, and are consistent. The so-called TAC principles, for those of you who are familiar with that. Then there's NGOs. Why is transparency relevant for NGOs? Transparency provides data, provides information, and that is just key to inform conversation about collective progress at the global level. Karin mentioned how relevant transparency data will be for the global stocktake. Their compilation and synthesis will be one of the key sources of input for the GST. So for NGOs, having this data available will provide them with certainty about the status of collective action by parties within this process. And for the first time, under the ETF, all parties will be reporting using the same guidelines, the same guidance. Why is it important for media? Media are essential to ensure that information provided to the public are accurate and that misinformation is avoided. It's key to ensure that the general public understands the importance of reporting transparent data and information about climate action and support. Communicating this information to the general public is just essential for the success of this process. Then, of course, we have youth. Youth could be seen, of course, as part of the NGOs. They are one of the NGO constituencies within this process, but we wanted to emphasize them as a standalone group because they are so important. I think the COP28 incoming presidency also mentioned quite clearly how youth represent a key group of stakeholders for them and how important their role it is. For young people, transparency is important to get data and information that will provide certainty about their future. It is important for them to find opportunities for engagement and cooperation. it is important for them to advocate for intergenerational equity, which was included as part of the principle of the Paris Agreement. So I could go on, but this is just a snapshot of why this is key. Then intergovernmental organizations, UN agencies, and multilateral institutions. They are essential for transparency because they provide assistance to parties on the ground for implementation. And finally, businesses. Transparency is very important for them to get a better understanding of their processes, better understanding of their impacts, their emissions, and that will help them to make more informed decisions about their investment, for instance. I know that we are running out of time, so that we need to really wrap up, and I will just close by providing this link. Through this QR code, you will be able to access the Together for Transparency landing page. It can be easily accessed with the link that you can see. You will find a lot of information. I also just want to emphasize that on Monday, there will be a poster session that will describe how transparency links to the ACE principles, for Action for Climate Empowerment Principles, in the foyer of the conference center. And with that, I will hand the floor back to Mariana for some closing statements. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Federico. Thank you, Karin. Thank you very much, Veronica. What to say? I mean, the presentation is very comprehensive. You have the manual. You saw your own answers in the Mentimeter, right? I mean, it's all about building trust, and it's all about giving everybody the opportunities to show and to prove what they are doing, right? And I really loved, Federico, what you said about the youth, to give assurance that everybody is doing their best to give them a future, a livable future. So thank you very much. That was really inspiring. And I would like just to invite you to go back to the Together for Transparency website, to eventually go back also to this event, because I really think that the presentation were very rich, and I strongly encourage you to disseminate. So the Together for Transparency initiative by the Secretariat wants to really bring down barriers and take the conversation out of silos. So it's not just about experts, it's not just about reviewers, it's about all those groups of people you saw, media, youth, IGOs, NGOs, parties, of course. So please be advocates of the Together for Transparency spirit and share the knowledge and share the links and the manual, if you can, with your colleagues back home. We would also like to invite you to participate in a survey, because the Together for Transparency initiative that started last year, it's meant to accompany all of you into this journey towards a successful destination, a livable future for everybody. And for that, this journey needs to be reviewed, right? We need to keep on the eye of the chart, right? And see if there are obstacles we were not foreseen before, see if there are shortcuts that we can take. And for that, we need you to participate. So please flash that code, QR code, answer very simple questions on what is it that you took away from these events, how these events and the whole initiative could be improved to serve you best. So with this invitation to keep the conversation going, I would like to thank very heartfully the colleagues at the UNFCCC Secretariat, to congratulate them for this incredible initiative, to thank you all for your attention, and to wish you a very good day. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.